Rachel here. Welcome to my Slow TV Stitchery. Well, good morning everyone. I'm going to continue this lower edge here, partly because there are elements of the upper section that I haven't thought through yet. I am going to undo this pearl cotton. It doesn't cover enough of the canvas at all. So, well, we'll see. Now, why did I do that? I should probably fish out one of my stilettos again. I do have a steel laying tool, but I find it a bit too sharp for most threads, so I'm going to stick with my bone stilettos for now. Always it is very useful to be able to blend threads in the needle, but those blended threads require management sometimes. I've been thinking, while I've been working on this and planning it, that there are probably two ways that I could tackle the motifs in among the freeform bargello for these elements. If this is what I choose to do, of course, I may come up with something entirely different by the time I've recovered from a mana. Recovered is the operative word. One of my possibilities will be the one that I think I'm going to apply this time, which is to simply use different stitches and therefore have a mix of stitches and a mix of effects going on. And that's certainly, it's not necessarily the easiest, and but it is probably it's the one which occurred to me first. That doesn't mean it's the best one, it's just the one that occurred to me first. The other possibility is that I could allow the Bargello pattern to flow through the motifs. So the only change is that the elements are in a different colour or a different texture of thread, but the stitch remains the same, and potentially even allow the edges of the motifs to be blurred by the flow of the pattern. I think that might, it sounds like it would be easier in some ways, because it would be easier to keep the pattern in place, but then I'm not entirely sure it would be easier, because picking the points at which to spread the design and the points to stay within the lines might be a bit exciting as well. So that will require some experimentation. So I suspect that my next adventure on this piece of canvas is going to be to try exactly that experiment. I wonder whether this will go the whole way back again. What do you think? I've only threaded one needleful of each blend. So I'm moving on from a general book about the Vikings to a book written by, I think, the first people to take seriously the saga of Leif the Lucky and his discovery of Vinland, and to make some discoveries at Lanceau-Meadow. I find it very interesting that after centuries of these oral traditions being regarded as outright fiction from start to finish, in the last 50 to 100 years, maybe a bit longer if you think of Schliemann, people have begun to take them seriously enough to go looking for what might be a kernel of truth, or some sense of what they might be, what they might have been invented to talk about, which is not necessarily the obvious things. When I was 8 or 9, there was a lot of excitement about Tim Severin's voyage across the Atlantic in a leather boat, inspired by the Navigatio of St. Brendan. And pretty much ever since, it seems to me, somewhere in the world there has been somebody looking into some culture's old stories and finding something in them that makes sense. Not just as entertainment around a fireside, although they were, but entertainment can be instructional. In fact, if you think about it, learning a new skill or learning about something that you're interested in is a lot of fun, even for people who don't think that they're scholars. So there is a distinct feeling now that the Vikings really did make it to Finland, although I don't think anybody believes it was actually grapes. The suggestion in the book I've just read is that it was cranberries they found. And I can imagine that being close enough. So I just hope that the next book I'm about to read has been well translated, because after reading the Brendan voyage and really enjoying it and being fascinated by the ideas, I then read Thor Heyerdahl's book about his travels in the Ra, the boat of papyrus or straw or something, and it had been, I think it was well translated in that it was an accurate functional translation, but there was no sense of charm or adventure, and as a 10-year-old it didn't have any of the things that would help me be engaged by it. And this one is, I suspect, was written in Norwegian or Danish, given that the early investigations into the Vikings seem to have been by their descendants from that part of the world. So we'll just have to wait and see. I had been intending to just continually darken into this corner, but then it occurred to me that the sense of flow would probably be better if there was a bit of variation in how dark the colours were. So I am working with a bit more variation here. I think if I were going to use this technique on Placidus, I would use slightly different shades, but as things stand, I am just experimenting, and experiments are a very good use of stash. And indeed of other people's stash as well. I rediscovered recently a roll of threads that came with another couple of interesting things from eBay some years ago, and some of them are fairly modern threads, but if some of them aren't periluster and other manufacturers from well before my time, I shall be vastly surprised. Some of them are even in those little plaits that one used to be taught how to do to keep the skeins when they were cut into lengths from misbehaving. How many other people remember those? This needs to be properly So I have left in place. The tacking stitches here through the fishy, in hopes that that will help when I get to it. And these tacking stitches here, now I'm not sure how accurate they are, so I may have to undo them and redo them later. But we will see what progress we make. Now, the other thing that I did with my tacks was to make these points a little bit blunter. So I'm going to try and do that here, because if I can make little changes like that, it will produce a more natural feeling of flow in the water. And I want to produce something which isn't realistic but feels as though it might be, I think. I agree. For those of you who are thinking that sounds an awful lot to ask of oneself, I agree. I have absolutely no idea whether this will ever work. But without trying, one will never know. That's all for this session. I hope you enjoyed following along. Happy stitching!